Lakeland Public Television's Common Ground is brought to you by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. Common Ground is funded by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund and the citizens of Minnesota. Hi, and thank you for joining us. Welcome to the third season of Common Ground. I'm your host, Ashley Hall. We have a lot of great segments to share with you this season, and it begins with our first episode, where you meet Norma Jansen, a watercolor artist from Longville who finds drawing to be the key component to a good painting. Paula Swenson of Bemidji uses vibrant color and bold forms in a style that's all her own. Gabe Leon of Brainerd uses resin to create beautiful and functional art. Plus, poet Anthony Swann of Bemidji shares his creative work.
I've been painting ever since I can remember. My mom would just put paintbrushes in my hand and paint, and that was exciting for me. So it was a good teamship even back then with her and I. And then was more of a traditional landscape painter, a little more representational, wasn't the most abstract back then, and just learning and trying to get dimensions and perspectives right, and just doing it all. Went to museum school in Boston for art school and graduated in 1996. And I learned a lot about that through the professors there, and then the final year there, I was introduced to resin. And I had seen someone putting found objects in a piece. One of the landscape painters brought me to see this, and I did have a vision right there when I saw it. And they were more catching the resin in a mold and putting more natural pieces of, I think it was bark and sticks. And I just had this vision to take my paintings and start to separate them. So where I would paint maybe the sky and the mountains, and if it was a landscape, but now I would sort of think of what came first, and I would put the sky in the background, I would pour some resin, and I'd start to maybe add some mountains sort of in the middle ground, pour some more resin, start putting some trees in up front, and finally after a couple more pours, maybe some really close-up pieces, and what you'd get was a three-dimensional painting. And I did those for a while. I was still exploring my representational side, and then more recently I said, let's separate these layers by more and get some more depth and explore some colors in my own head. So the pieces you'll see more now are colors, a little more abstract. You never know where I'm going though. I might revisit those mountainscapes. Maybe the rooster will sit up front and there'll be a big mountain back there and a sky. And so my wife is very creative and very good with color. And oftentimes she's the one who's putting the colors together, and eventually I'll take them again and work them with tools, power tools, just like you would blocks of wood. So I'll cut them out, and a lot of times she jump starts a piece with me, or on her own. But when we do work together, a lot more happens, in my opinion. We're a good team. Liquid paint is one of my really big ways to apply paint to a piece. I love the way it dries, and I don't force it. It just kind of dries and renders itself. I will get into regular acrylics or oils with a paintbrush and mix it all up and get them right and smooth it out until it's beautiful, but that's a lot of work, and I've found a lot of times with the right mix, you can get something to dry and render a lot more exciting than I could ever paint it. So I'm still creating it, but definitely different for me with the liquid paint. Actually, a lot of what you're seeing is recycled. This piece from here over was an old painting, and from here over again, another painting. The feet and the head were kind of created to bring the piece together, but what happens is these pieces go into a mold and they get shaped and finalized and they're recycled. So what we got here is just what I just said. It's a fully recycled piece. These are scraps from years ago. We've been pouring resin a good part of 20 years. And a lot of pieces aren't that exciting, and we'll just keep them around for colors. We've got bins and bins and bins of scraps. And this will be more the front, and what you'll see when it's finalized is hopefully a little more coordinated, color coordinated deer head. Sometimes when I'm making a piece, you overwork them, you overdo stuff, you overthink. But a lot of times on the pieces that are below the actual piece I'm working on, I'm not touching them as much, and what happens sometimes is a really subtle, simpler kind of a mood piece. This one's just orange. It's got a little red through it because something must have leaked off something else, but the artist's hand is somewhat out of it. And I think people appreciate that when they're not quite sure how that was made, or, you know, a lot of times us artists, we make things that are very predictable. A lot of brush strokes. You know, you can see the hand that made it almost in the piece, and you can understand it, and that's not as exciting sometimes as a piece that's really subtle, and the viewer says, how was this created? There's a hardener and a resin. When mixed together, the hardener and the resin will create, in about 6 hours, this glass-like acrylic surface. So I'll mix it up in a bucket, put on a respirator, maybe open a window. It's not very fumy, but I recommend that. Stir it up with some stir sticks as you would paint, and pour it into a mold. You pour it over a final piece. The particular rooster I have, and I keep showing you this, but this has been final poured. He was suspended up a little bit so he wouldn't stick to or bond to the piece below him or whatever was under him. And I take a rubber glove and I actually rub the resin around the outside of him, bringing this back to a shine, because this was actually more of a matte finish. It looks like raw wood, really. You can't even see through it when you've sanded it and shaped it. The final coat of resin is what brings it back to crystal clear. Any scratches, scuffs, they all come back to crystal clear with that final pour, so that's like the icing on the cake. Resin bonds with itself, so any scratches, scuffs, cuts, pour over them and they're gone. You can certainly buff it too, like you would an automobile, and compound out littler things. So a lot of ways to make sure you've got a nice shiny medium forever. And generally that's not an issue because it's difficult to scratch. I liken this medium to working with wood. You have a sawdusty type feel, and there's dust basically that's removed, and all the same sandpapers, same chisels and hammers, drills, everything you'd think of for wood will also work with resin. So yeah, I'll sand these pieces, shape them, round them, basically with all the tools you'd use for wood. There's really no difference. I would just work it, you know, I'd chisel away at the fins, I'd sand a little bit here and there, maybe grab my Dremel, get into the fins a little bit, just like you would a nice block of wood that you wanted to shape. And then it's all rough. It basically has a finish that you can't even see design through, almost the way you saw them with the dust on it. There's nothing you can see through there except a faint color or two. It's really 90% or so hidden from the image because it's sanded. It's just the way it is. Bring it upstairs to where I pour. I'll actually set it up and pour a final coat of nice resin over the top, and it will bring it back to this shine. So that is a fun process because usually by then I'm tired, I've worked on the piece, I'm dusty, and I get to finally see what was back under there that I haven't seen in days or however long it does take. Light has a huge effect with resin. There's morning light, there's night light. Right now you're seeing late daylight, and it's different from a front light. You know, it's coming in through the side at the moment, so you're getting a lot of different looks. You're getting shadows on the left side instead of the right because the light's coming in from the right. At night, an overhead light's going to be totally different as well. A lot of times we'll illuminate a piece from within, and that's a whole nother look. It's going to float more. There's no shadows. Front lighting is going to give you the most dramatic shadow behind some of the layers. You can actually illuminate these a variety of ways. If you actually had an underlight, maybe, or a lot of times a house is going to have just a natural overhead light. And if it's the right way, it will actually travel through the piece. You can get it to illuminate. You just have to set it up right. So many ways to light it. Sometimes you're in a confined space such as this one. It's a basement bathroom, and you stumble in, it's nighttime and you want to wash your hands and the lights are off, and what do you have here but an illuminating vanity. Just enough to not startle the person washing their hands. They can certainly see themselves in the mirror or see their hands. And functional, fashionable, very fun function to have illuminating vanity. Illuminating bar top, illuminating counter in your kitchen, something. So it's a shiny, durable, sometimes functional medium. And to me, it just is uplifting and exciting.
Nocturnes. O night that is hushed, we cannot perceive your silence. In our ears the hammers of commerce, in our mouths new slander and tribute, in our hearts endless divisions. We have known at times your vigil, ready beyond our preoccupations, yet we live in day. My companions in the night are moths, floating over the bosom of night with no thoughts of violence. Love visits us this way on mysterious, weightless wings that sing in the dark.
My name is Paula Swenson, and I'm from Bemidji, and this is my studio, The River of Time. So this is where I paint. I do have lights, a mixture of incandescent and fluorescent lights, but I really like the natural light, so I usually have my easel kind of over where I can get the most light in the corner. This is a painting I'm working on. I call it Cloud and her Calf, and the spots in the cows, or the cow and the calf, are imaging the clouds in the sky. This is a color wheel. I'm sure everyone that's been through grade school has seen a color wheel. And I use this to find which colors I want to use in a painting. So in this painting, I wanted to use kind of a red violet. So if you look on the back of this, this talks about triad colors, tetrad, and complement and split complement. What I often use is the triad colors. So the violet and the orange and the green are on 3 parts of the color wheel. So that's what I'm probably going to do. I start with a wash and just wash the color on. And then I'll cover the whole entire canvas with the colors I think I want. Different colors react differently next to each other. So you really need to get them on the canvas and see how they're going to react with each other. At this point in my painting, I just use a really watery wash. I'm not going to use any medium yet. My influences include the Expressionists, the Fauves, Cezanne, Paula Manderson-Becker. I began painting with my mother. My mother's an artist, and you know, that was the only thing I ever wanted to be, was an artist. From the time people first started asking me that, what do you want to be? I want to be an artist. I will get into more detail as I progress in the painting. The details are really about the last thing that go on. These are some examples of the process. So this is where we are right now. This is just a wash, and let's see this one. Here's where I have the entire board covered, so I can start comparing the colors and how they're working together. Now I'm starting to build up the surface, and the colors are getting a little stronger. I've adjusted the gray in the sky. I've started playing with some different shapes. And then finally, I try to keep the color moving around the canvas. So I've got purple tree or purple clouds, and I think I'm going to paint some of these trees purple too. People are really attracted to the colors in my work. I think it's what gets the attention first, and then maybe the subject matter second. If I'm doing something other than landscape, I will sit down and brainstorm and write down what I'm thinking about, and then I will go back to each individual word that I've written down and free associate with that word. Several years ago in the winter time, I was imagining a summer room, and I decided I'd paint that room, a room with trees in it and a window, and the name of the painting is Behind My Eyes, which is in my head, and I have a little bit of summer inside my head in the middle of winter. After I come up with an idea what I want to paint, then I gather resources together, either go out and take photographs or have someone pose for me, and then I'll start drawing, and I draw directly on the canvas, and this is vine charcoal. It's soft. You can buy different grades of it, soft to harder, but I prefer the soft. So you can kind of see here, I had the cow's leg out here further, and then I decided that didn't look right, so I just erased it and redrew it. So it's a good tool for painters. We've got blue-violet in the sky, so I want to make a gray, I want to gray out the blue-violet. So if I look, its complement is yellow-orange. So I'm going to take just a little bit of yellow-orange and mix it with the blue-violet, and that will give me a shade of gray. Sometimes I have to live with the painting for a few days before I decide what a color is going to be. My painting is about color, line, and movement.
Here are 3 short poems, 2 one-liners and 1 two-line poem. First, the buffalo. The buffalo is the shape the planes take when they move. 2, autumn. The falling, drifting leaves say more than 100 politicians. Wintergreen. Look, wintergreen. Imagine green leaves and blood-red jewels peeking through snow.
I'm Norma Jansen. I'm a watercolor artist from Longville, Minnesota, and today I'm going to paint tulips. I got these tulips from my neighbor, and I thought they were really, really pretty. I started working on them earlier, and the first thing I always do before I do anything else is make a value sketch. And I spend more time drawing than I do painting. That's where I solve all the problems that I think I might have when I'm doing my work. To me, if you're working with watercolor, the first word in it is water, and the method that I use is wet into wet, which is one of the riskiest watercolors to use or do. And basically the problem is whatever you put on there stays, and you're stuck with it one way or another. Sometimes you can work out a problem and sometimes you can't. But the joy of it is you get wonderful things that happen. You didn't really plan it, you didn't know it, but sometimes it's the best thing that you can see on your paper. I also use pretty large brushes. I hardly ever go to a tiny one. And to me, again, that holds a lot of water and, helps my paint. Okay, I'm going to start with my process of just kind of getting some colors on. And I think, you know, since they're so yellow and so orange, I want to go to the other side of the color wheel, which would be the blues or the purples, to kind of quiet it down. Also, if you do an opposite color, it makes that stand out more. So the first time around, to get as much on my paper as I possibly can. And I really think to me, the paintings that I've done that I like the best are the ones that I've pretty much done at one time. And again, the big problems should have been solved because I did all that drawing. And the other thing with watercolor, anything that I put on here will be a lot lighter when it dries. Some people think that painting is relaxing, and I've never felt that way. I find it maybe stimulating, but I actually get very nervous when I'm working. To soften, you can also grab a dry brush. There's like a little shadow. See if I can pull that out. I do flowers. I like flowers. My yard is full of flowers, and in the wintertime we have bouquets. There's always flowers in the house. But I have done buildings and some more rustic paintings, but I enjoy the flowers. And I like to choose, if it's possible, flowers that have large petals. However, I've done many different ones. I always have my violets here year-round, and I've painted them many times. And they have small flowers, but if you work with them in a cluster, it makes them appear bold. This is very pretty in here. If I can find a way to put that on here, I would like to do that. Sometimes if I have a plant, like an iris, I'll take anything, toothpicks or my thumbnail or my knife or something, just to kind of scratch in the parts. Anything in any good painting or drawing, you should be able to look at it from any direction. It would be a nice painting that way, and that could be very interesting. And somehow this could work, you know, change a few things up there. I think one of the things people notice about me, they know right away it's my painting, that's a Norma Jansen painting, is the more abstract flow. I know another artist told me that she thought my paintings looked like they were floating. They had such a soft look. But it's, I think if people know my paintings and they know me, they know it's a Norma Jansen. Another thing that painters often do is take their painting and put it in front of a mirror and get the reflection back, and if it looks good to them, then you know something's working. So it's the same thing with a good drawing. You You should be able to rotate it. And sometimes you can find something, if you rotate it, that you could really improve on. By rotating it and turning it around, this is something that helps me find something I need to improve on or something that isn't quite working. Or it might be just the thing that I want.
Thank you so much for joining us. We hope that you enjoyed the show, and we look forward to seeing you next week right here on Common Ground. If you have a segment idea for Common Ground pertaining to North Central Minnesota, contact us at legacy@lptv.org or call us at 218-333-3022. To view this episode or any Common Ground segment, visit us at lptv.org/Common Ground. Individual segments or copies of Common Ground, please call 218-333-3020. Common Ground is funded by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund with money from the vote of the people of Minnesota on November 4th, 2008. If you enjoyed this segment of Lakeland Public Television's Common Ground, consider making a contribution at lptv.org.